Sometimes desperation walks through the front door in heels, unaware it's about to meet obsession in a suit. Rain tapped like nervous fingers on the windows of the luxury office tower as Emily Carter stepped off the elevator, soaking wet, clutching a wrinkled envelope. She wasn't supposed to be there. Not in her discount store blazer, not with shaking hands, and certainly not with a request that scraped her soul raw. Her son, Liam, barely 6, had been diagnosed with leukemia 6 weeks ago. She'd sold her jewelry, emptied her savings, even started working nights at a diner after her full-time office assistant job. But nothing was enough. The hospital bill sat in her purse, folded too many times, like a paper wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. And now she was standing outside the glass office of Alexander Wolf, CEO, billionaire, ruthless, and her boss. He didn't look up when she entered. His chiseled features were half lit by his desk lamp, tie loosened, fingers flying across the keyboard like they were chasing deadlines. The air smelled of espresso and expensive cologne. She hesitated, then spoke. "Mr. Wolf, may I have a moment?" He looked up. Gray eyes locked on her. "Emily, it's after hours." Her throat closed. "I wouldn't be here if it wasn't urgent." His gaze flicked to her trembling hands, her blotchy face. He stood slowly, walking around the desk. "Sit," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. The silence between them pulsed. Then she pulled the envelope from her purse and placed it on the desk. "My son has cancer. I need $50,000 to start his treatment next week." He didn't blink. "I'll do anything," she added, voice barely a whisper. "Anything." He stared at her, not with pity, not even surprise, but something darker, curious, possessive. "Anything," he repeated softly. "That's a dangerous offer." Her lip trembled, but she didn't take it back. She had no pride left to protect. "I'll give you the money," he said finally, "but not as a loan." She froze. "One night," he said. "Tonight, with me. No strings, no questions." Her stomach dropped. Her legs turned to glass. She knew what he meant, knew the price, but Liam's pale face in that hospital bed was all she could see. She nodded. He stepped closer, lifting her chin gently. "You think you're sacrificing everything, but you have no idea what this night will begin." She sold her night like it meant nothing. But somewhere between silence and sunrise, something began to shift, soft, slow, and utterly forbidden. The hotel suite was silent, wrapped in dim golden light and the muffled hum of midnight traffic. Emily sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the skyline through the massive window, her hands clenched in her lap. The check sat on the nightstand beside her like a cruel trophy. $50,000 in exchange for one night of her life. But he hadn't touched her. Alexander had poured her a drink, asked if she wanted dinner, then told her to rest. That was it. Now he sat on the opposite couch, unbuttoned shirt sleeves rolled up, nursing a glass of whiskey, and watching her like she was some riddle he hadn't yet solved. "You thought I would use you like the others," he said quietly, almost amused. She flinched. "You didn't need to be gentle to keep your end of the deal. I didn't ask for your body, Emily. I asked for your night." Her brows pulled together, confused. "Why?" He leaned back, his voice softer than she expected from a man like him. "Because you were willing to give up your dignity for your son. That kind of love is rare. I just wanted to see it up close." Her breath caught. They sat in silence after that, the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but heavy with unspoken things. Emily shifted, unsure if she should speak again. But when she did, the words poured out. "I was 16 when I had Liam. His father left before the first ultrasound. I've been trying to prove ever since that I can do this on my own. But it's never been enough." He said nothing for a while, just listened. No judgment, no pity. Then, "You remind me of my mother." Emily blinked. "What?" "She worked 3 jobs, raised me alone, and died with nothing but an overdue rent notice in her purse." He took another sip. "No one helped her. I told myself I'd never be like her. But now I wonder if maybe she was stronger than I'll ever be." That night, nothing happened between them. Not physically, But something deeper began to grow. He wasn't the cold, controlling boss anymore, and she wasn't the helpless single mom. They were just two broken people in the quiet, daring to be seen. When dawn crept in through the glass, painting the room in soft amber, Emily stood to leave. She picked up the check but hesitated. "You could have had anything," she whispered. "Why just my time?" He walked her to the door and said without looking away, "Because time is the only thing you can never get back." She thought she knew what kind of man he was, until one locked drawer and a forgotten name shattered everything she believed. A week had passed since that night. Emily returned to her desk at Wolf Enterprises every morning like nothing had changed. But everything had. Alexander Wolf wasn't just her boss anymore. He was now a presence in her life she couldn't ignore. Watching her across the conference table, offering lingering glances in the elevator, his voice softer only when he spoke her name. And he hadn't cashed the night. She checked her account daily. The money hadn't moved. It made no sense. The check was real. His word, solid. But it was as if he was testing her, waiting for something. And she was waiting too, for him to pretend it hadn't happened. But he didn't. He stopped by her desk once just to ask how Liam was. She wanted to think it was kindness, but his eyes told her otherwise. It was interest. One evening, she stayed late to print reports. Most of the office was dark, except for the warm light from his open door. She heard a drawer slam, followed by a harsh exhale. Something instinctive pulled her toward the sound. She knocked gently. He didn't answer, but the door creaked wider. Papers were scattered on the desk. His tie was loose, his eyes bloodshot. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He looked up, startled, then annoyed at himself for letting her see weakness. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered. She started to turn away, but something caught her eye. A photo, peeking from beneath a file, a woman with auburn hair and soft eyes. She looked familiar. "That's my mom," he said, following her gaze. "Or was." Emily blinked. "She looks like you." The room chilled. He picked up the photo, thumb grazing the worn edges. "You're not just similar. You're nearly identical. I noticed it the first day you walked into this building." She stared at him, stunned. "What are you saying?" "I don't know," he admitted. "That maybe I'm drawn to something I lost. Or maybe it's more than that." She stepped forward, voice tight. "Are you saying I remind you of your mother, and that's why you paid me?" His jaw tensed. "Number, I paid you because I admired your sacrifice, but I kept you close because I couldn't let go." Emily's heart pounded, but a deeper, stranger feeling stirred in her chest. Not revulsion, not fear. It was understanding. He wasn't the monster she'd assumed. He was still that lost boy, still mourning. "You keep people out," she whispered. He looked away. "Because every time I let someone in, they leave." And for the first time since her husband walked out, she felt something new. Not pity, not desire, but the dangerous pull of connection. He gave her hope. She gave him trust. But neither of them were ready for the storm that followed, because falling in love was never part of the deal. Emily didn't know when the lines had begun to blur. Maybe it was the way Alexander started texting late at night. Simple things at first like, "How's Liam tonight?" Or "Don't forget to eat." Or maybe it was the way he waited at her car in the parking lot just to walk her to the elevator, always in silence, like being near her was enough, and she had let him in. She let him drive her to the hospital once, let him sit beside Liam as they watched cartoons. Alexander stiffened a suit and tie, holding a juice box like it was a grenade. Liam liked him, and that scared her more than anything, but nothing prepared her for what happened next. It was Friday afternoon when she was called to HR. The room felt colder than usual, and the woman behind the desk wouldn't meet her eyes. "We've received a complaint," she said, "anonymous, alleging that you engaged in unethical behavior with Mr. Wolf in exchange for financial compensation." The blood drained from Emily's face. "What?" The woman slid a document across the desk. "We're obligated to investigate. You're being placed on unpaid leave effective immediately." Emily stumbled out of the room, hands shaking, head spinning. Her eyes darted toward the executive floor, toward him, Tor, the only person who could have cleared this up with a single word. But Alexander wasn't at his desk. His office was dark. His phone went straight to voicemail. He had disappeared, just like every other man in her life. By the time she got home, her paycheck had been halted. Her rent was due. Liam's meds were low. She tried not to cry, but her body betrayed her, curling onto the kitchen floor as she sobbed into her knees. The next morning, she stood outside his penthouse, trembling in the cold. When he finally opened the door, her heart broke. He looked different, tired, cold, walled off. "You knew this would happen," she said, voice raw. "Didn't you?" "I didn't expect someone would report it," he replied, voice flat. "And you didn't defend me?" "I had lawyers involved. HR doesn't care about truth, only liability." Her fist clenched. "You promised you'd help me, not ruin me." "You came to me," he snapped. "You sold yourself. Don't act like I forced your hand." The words hit like a slap. Her breath caught, her tears burning with betrayal. "So that's what I am to you?" she whispered. "A receipt? A transaction?" He looked away, and that was answer enough. Emily turned and walked into the elevator, her heart shattered, because for the first time she had believed someone would stay. But Alexander Wolf just proved he was exactly what the world had always warned her about. She gave up everything to trust him, and now she wasn't sure if it was hope or heartbreak waiting on the other side of that silence. Days passed. Emily didn't hear from Alexander. Not a call, not a message, nothing. Her apartment grew colder with each night, the warmth of belief fading like sunlight behind storm clouds. The unpaid bills piled up. The landlord knocked. And Liam, sweet, trusting Liam, kept asking when Mr. Wolf would visit again. She didn't have the heart to tell him. Her pride screamed at her to forget him, to move on. But her heart betrayed her with every memory of his voice, his eyes, the quiet way he had watched Liam, like he was more than just a sick child, but something precious. Had any of it meant anything to him? She needed answers, closure, truth. So she walked into Wolf Enterprises one afternoon, not as his employee, but as a mother who deserved to know why she was discarded like a mistake. But the lobby guards stopped her. "Miss Carter," one said awkwardly, "you've been restricted from entering. Executive order." Restricted, like a threat, like a scandal, like trash. Tears burned in her throat as she walked out into the winter air, the wind slicing through her thin coat. She had never felt smaller. Across town, Alexander stood by the glass wall of his penthouse, phone in hand, replaying her last voicemail again and again. "I trusted you," she had said, "not because I had no other choice, but because I thought you were worth it." His fingers trembled. He had wanted to protect her. That was the lie he told himself. Keep her name out of the scandal. Avoid dragging her into the corporate storm brewing behind closed doors. But in doing so, he'd hurt her in the very way he swore he never would. The woman who reminded him of everything good and lost now saw him as nothing but a monster in a suit. He had pushed her away, and now she was gone. He stared at the check he had written, the one she hadn't cashed, now resting at the edge of his desk like a final, cruel symbol. He had offered money when what she needed was something deeper: safety, loyalty, love. But he didn't know how to love someone without breaking them. Alexander Wolf had built empires, but he couldn't rebuild the one woman who believed in him. Sometimes it takes one small voice, one open door, or one whispered truth to remind you that love never truly disappears. It just hides, waiting to be found again. Emily was pouring Liam's orange juice when a knock came at the door. She wasn't expecting anyone, especially not now, not when her world felt like it had folded in on itself. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and opened the door, and froze. Alexander stood there, not in his tailored suit, not with his guarded expression. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days, his coat wrinkled, eyes rimmed in red, hair tousled like he'd fought the wind just to get here. He was holding a paper bag. She opened her mouth to speak, but he spoke first. "I made a mistake." She didn't reply. Her hands clenched the door tighter. "I thought distancing myself would protect you," he continued, voice low. "I thought I could take the fallout on my own. but all I did was prove you right. I'm just like the people who've always left you." She swallowed hard, heart pounding in her chest. "Why are you here, Alex?" "Because I need you to know." His voice broke. "I never cashed the night because it wasn't a transaction for me. It never was." She looked away, tears stinging. "Then why did you let me feel like it was?" "I was scared," he admitted. "You saw through me. You saw me. And I didn't know what to do with that." Liam peeked from behind her, rubbing his eyes. "Mom? Who is it?" Alexander lowered to one knee, meeting the boy's sleepy eyes. "Hey, buddy," he said gently. "I brought you your favorite, peanut butter and banana muffins." Liam's face lit up. "You remembered?" Emily's breath caught. Alexander stood again and looked at her, his voice soft. "I remember everything." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." He walked into the tiny apartment, and it suddenly felt warmer, familiar, like coming home. They sat at the small kitchen table. Liam happily munched his muffin while Alexander told him a story about a boy who turned into a superhero after eating one too many bananas. Emily watched them, really watched them. She saw the tension in Alexander's shoulders ease, the way his eyes lit up when Liam laughed, the way he kept glancing at her, like he was afraid she might disappear if he blinked. Later, when Liam had fallen asleep on the couch, Emily walked him to the door. He hesitated. "I'm not asking for forgiveness tonight," he said quietly. "Just a chance to show you I mean it this time." She didn't respond right away, but when he turned to leave, she caught his wrist gently. "One chance," she whispered. "Don't waste it." For the first time in days, Alexander smiled, slow and soft, like hope returning after a long winter. He had the money, the power, the name, but none of it mattered, because the only thing he truly wanted was her trust, and this time he was ready to earn it. The next morning came softly, sunlight brushing over the city like a fresh breath after a storm. Emily hadn't slept much, her mind replaying everything from the night before, the knock at the door, the muffins, the way Alexander looked at her not like she was broken, but like she was the only thing that made sense in his chaotic world. She expected silence again, but then her phone buzzed. One new message from Alexander Wolf. "May I take you both to lunch?" No suits, no titles, just us. For a full minute, she stared at the screen. Her heart said yes, her fear said no. But Liam made the choice for her when he peeked over her shoulder and grinned. "Is Mr. Wolf coming to see us again?" She smiled. "Looks like it." They met at a quiet park on the edge of the city. Not his usual polished rooftop restaurants or chauffeur-driven entrances. Just grass, sunlight, and a picnic blanket. Alexander wore jeans. Jeans. He looked 10 years younger, laughing as he tried to juggle two apples and failed miserably, sending Liam into a fit of giggles. Emily hadn't seen her son this happy in weeks. Neither had she smiled like this in longer. When Liam ran off to chase pigeons, Alexander turned to her. His expression shifted, serious but soft. "I didn't come back just to fix things," he said. "I came back because I can't picture a future without you in it." Emily's chest tightened. "I've spent my whole life building walls," he continued. "But then you walked in, scared, desperate, fighting for your son, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years." She raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Someone worth risking everything for." The wind played with her hair, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath hitched. "Alex, It's not what you think," he said quickly. He opened the box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace, a charm in the shape of a tiny lion. "For Liam," he said, "because he's braver than most men I know." Her eyes filled. "And for you," he added, "I have no necklace, no ring, no fancy words. Just this." He reached out, took her hand. "I promise you, I will never leave again. Not when things get hard. Not when people talk. Not when the world turns cold." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I'm not asking you to forgive me today," he whispered. "Just let me stand beside you and prove that love doesn't have to hurt." Emily didn't respond with words. She leaned forward and kissed him, gently, like a question answered. And that kiss was her promise in return. She never expected to smile again. Not like this, not so freely. But sometimes joy sneaks in through the cracks grief leaves behind and blooms where you least expect it. 3 weeks later, the laughter in Emily's apartment didn't sound foreign anymore. It sounded like home. Liam sat cross-legged on the living room floor, covered in flour, proudly holding up a crooked cookie shaped like a dinosaur. Look, I made Mr. Wolf's face. Alexander looked offended. Are you saying I look like a T-Rex? Liam nodded solemnly. A grumpy one. Emily burst into laughter, loud and unguarded, the kind that rose from a place deep in her chest she hadn't felt in years. Alexander grinned as he wiped flour on his face dramatically, leaning back on his elbows like a man who had finally found a reason to stop running. The apartment hadn't changed. The furniture was still secondhand. The paint still chipped in corners. But the energy inside was transformed. There was light again. That evening, after Liam had fallen asleep in a nest of blankets on the couch, Emily found Alexander in the kitchen, barefoot, humming softly as he washed dishes. Didn't know billionaires did their own cleanup, she teased, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. I'm full of surprises, he murmured. She leaned her cheek against his back. I almost forgot how this feels. Normal. Safe. He turned around to face her. You deserve that. Every day for the rest of your life. Her smile faded slightly. It's still hard sometimes. The fear of losing it all again. And what about you? She asked quietly. You've been alone too. He smiled, tired but content. Not anymore. A week later, Liam received the results from his latest round of treatment. Remission. The word felt like a miracle wrapped in light. Emily broke down crying in the hospital hallway, her legs giving out from under her. Alexander caught her before she hit the ground and held her there for a long, quiet moment. I don't know how to live without fear anymore, she sobbed into his shirt. You won't have to, he whispered. We'll learn together. That night, the three of them danced in the living room to an old record player Alexander had fixed himself. Liam sat on Alexander's shoulders, arms out like airplane wings, giggling wildly as Emily twirled in mismatched socks. There was no music loud enough to describe the joy. No camera could have captured the glow on her face. It was simple, unscripted, real. And for the first time in a very, very long time, Emily didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was living. Love is easy in the quiet. But when life knocks, when the past rises, and when the future demands answers, only the strongest hearts remain standing. 3 months later, the world didn't look the same. Emily stood at the mirror in a sleek navy dress, one Alexander had insisted on buying for her first official public appearance by his side. Tonight, she wasn't just a single mom or an assistant. She was his partner, his guest of honor, his heart quietly stitched into his life. But she wasn't sure she was ready for the world to see her that way. You okay? He asked from behind her, adjusting his cufflinks in the reflection. She met his eyes in the mirror. I'm nervous. He stepped closer, wrapping his arms around her waist. You're the bravest person I've ever met. You faced doctors, eviction notices, and heartbreak. A room full of board members can't shake you. She smiled softly but didn't speak, because part of her was shaken, not by the people outside, but by the voice inside her head. What if you're not enough for his world? What if they see right through you? At the charity gala, flashing lights and whispered voices followed her like shadows. Some people greeted her warmly, others smiled with polite condescension. But what stung most was when she overheard a woman whisper to another behind a wine glass, "That's the girl he paid, right? The one with the sick kid?" Emily felt her stomach twist. Later that night, when Alexander found her outside on the balcony, clutching the railing, he immediately knew. What happened? He asked. She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, Maybe I don't belong in your world, Alex. He stepped beside her, took her hand. Then I'll leave mine and build a new one around you. Her eyes filled. They're always going to talk. Let them, he said. Let them choke on their own silence while we live louder. She wanted to believe him, but the pressure wasn't just public. At home, things weren't perfect. Liam began acting out at school. He was healthy, but change had unsettled him. New schedules, new home, new father figure. One night, Emily caught him crying in the closet, hugging a worn drawing of his old apartment. I miss when it was just us, he whispered, when you didn't cry so much. Emily sat beside him, hugging him tight. I know, she said, and I promise, I'm not crying because I'm sad anymore. I cry now because things are changing, and sometimes even good changes hurt. Alexander tried to step back, give space, adjust, but he wasn't used to sharing. Not his time, not his heart. Sometimes they argued. Sometimes Emily slept on the couch just to cool off. And yet, every morning he made her coffee. Every night he checked on Liam before bed. And every time she felt like running, he pulled her closer and whispered, "We don't quit." Not on each other. The world tried to shake them. The past tried to haunt them. But love, the real kind, wasn't measured by perfection. It was measured by endurance. And they were still standing. They didn't fall in love like a fairy tale. They built it brick by brick, scar by scar, until what they had was stronger than anything they'd ever known before. Spring arrived like a quiet promise. Emily stood barefoot in the garden behind their new home, a modest two-story house tucked at the edge of the city, with wildflowers growing through cracks in the old stone path. The kind of place that felt earned instead of gifted. Liam raced through the grass with a kite, shrieking laughter into the wind. His cheeks were full of color again. His steps didn't wobble anymore. Life had returned to his little body, and with it, something sacred had returned to hers. She turned at the sound of footsteps behind her. Alexander stood on the porch, sleeves rolled up, watching her like she was the answer to a question he never knew he was asking. A softness had settled in him lately. Not weakness, peace. He stepped down to her, taking her hands gently in his. I've been thinking about something. That's always dangerous, she teased. I want to step away from the company, he said, voice steady. Let the board handle the day-to-day. I've given them enough of my life. She blinked. You'd walk away from it? I'd walk towards something better, he said. You, Liam. Mornings that don't start with spreadsheets and nights that end with bedtime stories. Her eyes welled with tears. You mean it? I do, he smiled. I'm not asking for escape. I'm asking for a different kind of empire. One with muddy shoes on the porch and burnt pancakes on Sunday mornings. She leaned into him, resting her head against his chest. His heartbeat was slow, steady, safe. Later that night, after Liam had gone to bed, Emily sat in her studio, the tiny sunroom they'd converted into a writing nook. She had always scribbled poetry in scraps, dreams in notebooks. But now she was writing her first children's book. One about a lion who wasn't the biggest or the strongest, but who protected his pride with love. Alexander peeked in. What's it about? She smiled. A boy and a mother and a man who didn't know he had a heart until he gave it away. He stepped in and kissed her temple. Sounds familiar. Outside, the wind whispered through the leaves, carrying with it the faintest echo of their past. But it didn't hurt anymore. It didn't sting. It reminded them how far they'd come. Their beginning had started with pain, but their new beginning, it was filled with laughter, healing, and the kind of love that doesn't need permission, only courage. Love doesn't always ask for grand gestures. Sometimes it demands everything, silently, painfully, and waits to see if you'll still stand when the ground disappears beneath you. It started with a cough. Liam had been doing so well, gaining weight, smiling, running. Emily almost believed the worst was over, until one night he coughed so hard he couldn't breathe. The emergency room lights blurred into chaos. Machines beeped like alarms in a war zone. Alexander clutched Emily's hand, watching helplessly as nurses rushed their son behind curtains and into tests neither of them wanted to hear about again. He's relapsing, the doctor said quietly. Aggressive. We need to begin treatment immediately. And he'll need a marrow donor. Fast. Emily stood frozen. Alexander asked, what are the chances of finding one? Almost none, the doctor replied, unless a biological relative appears. Emily's knees buckled, because there was no one. No father on the birth certificate, no siblings, no cousins, just her. And then Alexander stepped forward. Test me, he said. The doctor blinked. You're not biologically related. Do it anyway. Emily turned to him, stunned. Alex, if there's any chance I can help him, I'll take it. The results came 2 days later. Not a full match, but close. Close enough to try. The procedure was painful. Bone marrow extraction left Alexander weak, pale, feverish for days. Emily sat beside his hospital bed as he slept, IV in his arm, his lips chapped, his body trembling. She couldn't stop crying. You didn't have to do this, she whispered, brushing his hair back gently. You're not even his. But the word caught in her throat, because he was, not by blood, but by choice. He had chosen Liam in ways no man ever had, through fear, through scandal, through sickness. He had chosen them. When he finally woke, he looked at her through hazy eyes and asked one thing. Is he okay? Emily collapsed onto his chest, sobbing. He's fighting, like you. He managed a weak smile. He gets that from his mom. The days blurred after that. Hospitals, meds, recovery. But Liam began to improve. Alexander regained his strength. And one night, as Emily tucked both of them in, her son in his hospital bed, and Alex on the couch beside him, because he refused to sleep anywhere else, she finally understood something. This wasn't sacrifice. This was love. And it didn't need to be loud, or perfect, or even fair. It just needed to stay. It didn't end with a kiss, or a vow, or a fairy tale. It ended the way real love always does, quietly, with hands held tight, and hearts finally at peace. 6 months later, life didn't look perfect, but it looked theirs. The hospital visits had slowed. Liam's tests were stable. His hair was growing back, messy, thick, and stubborn, just like his spirit. He was back in school, running through the halls like nothing had ever tried to take him away. And Alexander, he never returned to his empire. He built a new one, smaller, quieter, a tech nonprofit helping families with medical costs. It didn't make him headlines. It made him happy. One crisp autumn afternoon, the three of them stood at a small cabin by the lake, a weekend getaway Alexander had bought for Emily. Not for luxury, for space, to breathe, to rest, to just be. Emily stood on the deck, watching the water shimmer in the late afternoon sun. Her fingers were stained with paint. She'd been working on a children's book inspired by Liam's journey. Her words were finally reaching others. Her story was no longer just survival. It was healing. Alexander stepped beside her, arms around her waist, pressing a kiss to her temple. He's asleep, he murmured. Out cold after one marshmallow? She laughed, leaning back against his chest. He's getting stronger every day. So are you. She turned in his arms, her eyes soft but steady. I used to think I was only allowed a little happiness, just enough to survive. But now? He asked gently. Now I want the whole damn thing. He smiled, then pulled a small box from his coat pocket. No pressure, he said. No big moment. No crowd. Just you, me, and this. She opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band. No diamonds, no flash, just truth. I already consider you my family, he said. This just makes it official, if you want it. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't cry this time. She smiled. I do. That night, as Liam snored softly in the other room and the stars blinked silently above the lake, Emily and Alexander lay together on the old wooden floor, wrapped in blankets in each other. No fear, no debts, no secrets left to haunt them, just the rhythm of two hearts beating in sync, a final harmony.